right, guys, ready to go. So if you can't notice, I'm in the prime position here, which means Dan's out of town for the week. So I've got the head of the table here, and we got the ACA big guns here. So let's go ahead and introduce yourselves. You guys are, frequent guests of the podcast, obviously.
So I'm Jeff Gaston, Executive Vice President of Sales for Agent Boost Marketing.
I'm Heather Whittywood, the Director of ACA and IFP Growth.
With
Agent Boost.
Yeah, in case you haven't seen her other podcasts.
Adam Van Fossen, VP of Growth for HealthSherpa. Super excited to be here.
All right, so HealthSherpa brought out the big guns, and we got Adam all the way in from North Carolina, came across to be on the podcast and spend some time with us today. So really sincerely appreciate it, Adam. It means a lot for you to come out and spend the time with us.
Happy to be here. I always love hanging out with you guys, so happy I can make the trip out.
Yep, Adam's one of our friends in the industry. HealthSherpa, great company, great connection, and anybody that does ACA, of course, knows who HealthSherpa is and what you guys do. But why don't you give us a little bit of a background on what your role is at HealthSherpa and kind of how you got into the industry?
Yeah, so compared to you guys, I'm a baby in the healthcare industry. I'm kind of a newbie, but very familiar with marketplaces. So I've been at HealthSherpa for a little under a year. It's my first role in the healthcare industry, and it's been super fun and interesting learning all about this crazy industry that we all work in. Prior to HealthSherpa, though, I was the Chief Revenue Officer at the largest regulated marketplace in the beverage alcohol industry. And we grew that marketplace up from a really small New York company to being across all these different states, dealt with regulation and all different kinds of interesting supply and demand challenges. And I actually had heard about HealthSherpa way back in 2015, talked to the CEO, George. It wasn't the right time to work there then, but when we sold the marketplace that I was working at and went through that acquisition, I went back to George and I was like, hey, HealthSherpa looks like it's doing pretty well. Let's talk. And so I've been there over the last year.
Yeah, maybe they might have had a little bit deeper pockets from the first time you went there to coming back. So
I think that's true.
That was a good move. So yeah, well, tell us a little bit about what your position entails there at HealthSherpa and what you do.
Yeah, sounds good. So HealthSherpa is the largest exchange in the ACA. So about 55% of all enrollments in the ACA within the FFM markets flow through HealthSherpa. And of the ACA, like agent broker driven enrollments, about 70% go through HealthSherpa. So we have this very dynamic, ever-changing marketplace. And so I oversee the demand side of the marketplace. So I maintain all of our relationships with agents and brokers, oversee our marketing team. And then, of course, we have the supply side of the marketplace, which is our carrier partners. And so those are kind of the two sides. And so I oversee the go-to-market operations for the demand side.
Awesome. And originally, we scheduled you to come out on this podcast because we were going to tout and announce and really talk a lot about MDN, right? Member Defense Network.
That's right.
And that's kind of, shifted a little bit of I don't want to say favorability, but like focus right now with a lot of the other things going on in the ACA space. So the reason why MDN, Member Defense Network, became so important and why you guys were putting a private focus on that was because of some of the chaos that we have in the ACA space. So some of the fraud and the AOR. Why don't you kind of give us, from HealthSherpa's perspective, a high-level overview of some of the challenges that are facing the marketplace and CMS when it comes to like the fraud, waste, and abuse stuff going on?
Yeah. So I'll start this just by saying that I think the ACA has been a bigger success in terms of enrollment volume than anybody could have imagined when it launched. Last year, doing 21 million enrollments. I mean, it's just been an incredibly successful industry that's formed around it, right? And what's driven that success has been agents and brokers. With all that growth, with all that success comes awesome things like all these entrepreneurs that have come into the space that have created awesome agencies like Agent Boost. But also what's come with all that growth is problems, right? Where people see money and dollar signs, they see opportunity to exploit it. And so we've seen fraud crop up. And as we've seen that growth curve for the ACA and the FFM markets really curve upwards, HealthSherpa as an organization has seen that this problem was going to become a bigger issue for quite a long time. And we have always looked at other industries and how they're solving fraud issues be more successful when they're solved with private industry, right? So we came up with this concept of the member defense network, which is essentially how can we create a anti-fraud program that does not stifle the agent and broker role and still values the agent and broker role, but yet still does what's best for the member. And so we had this plan to spin up the Member Defense Network as a standalone entity. It would be an industry consortium of agents and brokers and carriers and EDE platforms, not just HealthSherpa, but every enrollment pathway. And the idea behind it was going to be a registry for consent, which what that really means is it's a way to determine member intent, right? And that's really what we're trying to protect at the end of the day is what does the member want to do? What plan do they want to enroll in? What kind of changes do they want to make? And so we created the Member Defense Network to be a registry for consent, whether that be a consent form, whether that be an online portal that you click in and you provide consent through the CMS portal, or whether it be ID proofing if you're to make any changes to a plan. And so we would hold this consent in a database is the idea. And then if it was the most recent and most, tightened up version of the consent. So if it was time stamped, right? If it was ID proofed, then we would tell carriers to pay commission to that enrollment. That is the most recent one with the most valid consent. And so it was really to help carriers understand which enrollment is the enrollment that they should pay, and it helps agencies understand if there is a change needed to an application or if an application is disputed. Here's the process you take. So if it has no consent attached, well, attach consent, and then it will be under your name. If it has consent attached, you need to escalate it further and get it ID approved or time stamped in order to better ascertain if it was what the member intended you to do. So that was the idea behind it, right? And I think that how we looked at it was like smart 2FA, smart two-factor authentication, which is that in a new enrollment doesn't need to be two-factor authenticated because it's a one-to-one connection between that member and that agent. But if there's a dispute, then you obviously want to authenticate that and be able to verify it. So that was the idea behind it.
Yeah. So, and maybe Heather and Jeff, you guys can chime in on this, but I kind of want to back up and set the table for the history of what I would consider how we got here as an industry with some of the fraud and some of the bad practices. And this is my take. I don't profess to be the world's greatest expert on the ACA Marketplace. And in full disclosure, we didn't really jump in with both feet until about 2 years ago. But my read on it was essentially this. And it's only been since about this time of last year that you officially even had to have consent to make a plan change, which seems wild, right? So my read on it is this, is that from the 2016 through the COVID years, there was this undercurrent or this cottage market growing under the ACA space where maybe the enrollments weren't so high, but agents and nefarious entities and bad actors in the space had kind of figured out that you could essentially claim these policies or squat on these policies without even having consent. And so as it's come to light over the past year, there were a lot of entities and agents that were assigning policies to themselves that people maybe had no idea, and they were growing big books of business. Entities were even doing this, and they would like data enrich. They would find ways that you only had to have what name, date of birth, and search them up in the registry, and then they'd be like, oh, it's like it's my policy now. And then what happened is you had a lot of people build these big books and somehow got this very wild sense of entitlement that a lot of them were their clients. And then what happened was last year they said, hey, go figure, you actually have to have permission or consent to make any sort of plan change here. And this is when, the hockey stick of enrollments was really going up. Everyone's joining ACA. There's a lot of subsidies. The marketplace is hot. Big business is getting into it. A lot of agents and agencies are going into it. And then you had people starting to lose, or there was policies changing hands through, real agents going, oh, that's actually my policy. and other people were enrolling or getting legitimate enrollments or making plan changes or agent of record changes. And it became this really wild, toxic game of hungry hippos where everybody was vying for these policies. And you had a lot of these bad entities with big books of business and agents where it's like, they never really should have had those policies to begin with. And now they're out there going, nope, those policies were mine. Oh, an agent got a consent or an agent of record change on that. Nope, that was mine. And a bunch of bad actors in the industry were using tools to just change those policies back to them, whether or not they actually had some sort of legitimate consent or not. Is that all? Do we all agree that's kind of a high level assessment of what's kind of gone on? Any color to add?
Well, what I would add to that is that there's kind of two flavors of unauthorized plan switching, which is the kind of official title
UPS.
For this problem.
We love acronyms in this industry. So UPS, for those of you who don't know, unauthorized plan switches.
Yeah, not the kind of UPS you look forward to that drops a package off, but the kind that is like the problem for our industry. So there's kind of two big flavors of this. One is straight up fraud, right? Just the member has no intent of enrolling in that plan, and somebody searches them on the database and enrolls them so that they can get a commission. The other is what I would term like gray area plan switches, which is that, I talked about how all the kind of new businesses and new agencies entered the space and they grew very quickly. And so what do you need when you grow really quickly as an agency or as an FMO? You need leads, right? And so you kind of look at your quality bar of leads from being, I'm going to run my own marketing and I'm going to do one-to-one lead buys where I know exactly who I'm targeting and what their intent is, to, man, I just need more leads because I got to fuel these agents. And so you start buying lower and lower and lower quality leads. The problem is that those lead vendors are also selling that lead to your competitor agency. And so what that means for the agent is they go, I was just given this lead, I just talked to this member, and they're being switched to somebody else. And sometimes the person on the other side feels that same way, and maybe 4 or 5 other agents do because they're working that same lead. And so the solution to UPS is not to just like shut the whole thing down. You need to have a smart way to really determine what the member wanted to do in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we kind of experienced that at the height of it. And we all talked internally and said, hey, it looks like we've probably got about 2 years of runway of this marketplace being really hot and growing before some things are going to change, because there's some mechanisms internally with the plan changes and things that need to be changed. And that happened in about 6 months versus 2 years because it got so, the crescendo got so bad so fast. And you're right. I mean, we were even seeing it where the lead vendors then also caused a lot of the problems in the very beginning because they were, reselling everything to everybody else. And, oh, you want inbound calls? Great. I'm selling them to Heather. I'm selling them to Jeff. I'm selling them to Adam. And the clients are like, I don't know. I thought I already did this. Let's go through it again. And then everybody's justifiably thinking they have the right to that. And then there's some field agent there who's also trying to, get that policy. So there was a lot of chaos, right? And I do think that you talked about the gray area, and I think that it's important to know that not everybody is fraudulent and has been operating like this. And I do think that there were a handful of really bad entities that kind of put a big stink over the whole industry and, have kind of caught the ire of CMS big time. And it's at a really, really bad time for agents where we're getting a bad reputation in FMOs and, maybe even, I don't know if it's been kind of, you guys have had some blowback to CMS, but it puts a bad stain on those of us who want to do things the proper way. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my experience from joining HealthSherpa has been that agents are awesome, and that a vast majority of agents, and almost all the ones that I deal with at HealthSherpa, genuinely want to help people. They're running great businesses. And unfortunately, that's not the perception with some regulators. It's not the perception with, other parties in the industry. And so I think that there's a lot of work to do on the PR front to kind of rebuild the reputation of agents, because you're right. It's been a few large, very vocal parties that have kind of tainted things. and also kind of a lot of it has created this industry where the gray zone has really flourished. And so, yeah, we need smart, logical, thoughtful solutions to bring it back.
Now, you guys are actually terming those bad actors, the 1% out there that are doing things the wrong way. You guys are, I guess, not terming, but you guys are banning them from your guys' platform.
Absolutely. Yeah. We spend a ton of our company's resources on fraud prevention. And so we have a large fraud prevention unit, a big team that investigates cases, bans agents, reports them to the authorities. We don't want those folks on HealthSherpa, right? What's good for HealthSherpa is where good actor agents are using the platform and bad actor agents are not. So yeah, we built a lot of structures around that.
Yeah, and I definitely think that there's been some major headway in cracking down on the fraud, waste, and abuse since January. I mean, we were massively victimized by a lot of these practices at the beginning of the year, and I think the whole industry's kind of gone through this cataclysmic shift, and it continues to go through this evolution. And I think that at the end of it, we're going to be in a better place, but we've seen lawsuits happen, right? CMS has filed lawsuits against a couple of big entities. There's been some massive terminations from carriers. We've actually worked successfully with some of our carrier partners to have some of these bad actors out there termed in the industry. And I know you guys are always working on cleaning that up as well. So just kind of before we get into some of the other more recent tools and mechanisms and things, what else can agents and agencies do out there to, call out or help? I really hate encouraging agents to nanny state it, because there's a lot of agents out there that, like, every time they lose a client, it's got to be fraud or a dirty call center or something. It could never be your client just switched away from you, So I'm very hesitant to encourage agents to, blow the whistle, so to say. But what should agents be looking for as far as like really egregious fraud, waste, and abuse on the ACA side?
In terms of what agents should be looking for, like if you experience a problem, like using HealthSherpa, report it to the HealthSherpa team and to the fraud prevention unit there, because they have they have good connections with the authorities to be able to report that and help work that case. I would also say that, like, if you're dealing with big issues and repeat offenders, like, I would say HealthSherpa, and then also direct to authorities, like work with your agency and stuff like that too, to do that reporting, because those names don't just come from that one agent. Mm-hmm. It's the same names coming up over and over and over again. So the more that you can report, you could say, like, oh, here's one strike, here's two, here's three strikes. And those are the ones that really get escalated, so that, something real can take place versus just a slap on the wrist.
Yeah. So with MDN, what you guys were building, and with what, CMS is kind of doing, we feel, Agent Boost as well, we feel an obligation to make sure that we clean up the industry and that private entities figure out good common sense solutions, because, like Dan and I always say, you never want to ask the government to solve your problems, because you're generally not going to like the answer, answers that you get back, right? And so, CMS has a tough job, obviously, when you start talking about regulating health insurance and complicated products for millions and millions of people. But, recently, because it's August 12th today, we've kind of gone through a couple of massive changes on the AOR side with HealthSherpa. So maybe you could kind of talk to us about how CMS kind of came and required a change in the agent of record changes, and kind of where we're at now.
Yeah. I could go on for a long time about this, so definitely cut me off if I'm rambling a bit.
I think people are very interested to hear this portion.
There's a lot of people
would love
interested.
to hear as much of the inside details as you could.
Yeah, I mean, ever since I joined the company, like a year ago. So when I joined, George, the CEO of the company, was like, hey, keep your eye on this ball, this fraud issue. This is a real issue. Here are the things that we're doing about this now, but this has the potential to become something bigger, So we've seen this unfolding, and so we've been working on things like, I kind of look at it as like levels to how we can handle this, right? So there's obviously, like, I would say, softer or more gradually deployed private industry solutions, stuff like the fraud prevention team that I just mentioned, right? We can hire people to track down these issues. you can come up with more aggressive private industry solutions like the Member Defense Network, which is like, hey, this is bigger than just HealthSherpa. Let's draw in other EDs, let's draw in carriers, let's draw in agencies to work together on this problem. And I would say that those kind of problems I would liken to like a scalpel, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like you can see that bad part that you want to cut out, and you cut out that bad part, and then you can iterate and keep developing it pretty quickly and kind of watch where it's going and adapt quickly. Then you have regulatory changes, right? Which can happen swiftly, and they're more like a sledgehammer, right? It's like, here's this thing, an axe, right? So it's a much more blunt force tool to be able to impact change, and it will have change, but it'll also have much bigger consequences than the targeted approach. And then, of course, you have like nuclear bomb options too, which is like writing stuff into law that is really hard to change. And so I think we're kind of existing on an escalation pathway of this issue right now, where it's kind of like, obviously CMS has taken a more serious posture towards it, and they've released some major changes. And so I think like now's the time to really, adhere to what CMS is putting out there, pay attention to what they're asking folks to do, and not let there be kind of holes and workarounds in it, but really adhere to it so that we can keep growing the ACA and building this together. Because I think that the last move, kind of getting directly to your point, was one of the biggest moves that's taken place in a while, which is that a lot of plans need to change, right? You need to update income. You need to update a plan that's better for the member. And any plan change now is getting hit with an error code on the EDE platform. So on HealthSherpa, on any other EDE platform, if you're an agent that wants to go in and update an existing plan, you're now going to see an error code. This is CMS taking a very aggressive anti-fraud measure. And so we as HealthSherpa have had to react pretty swiftly to this change. So our initial response was to, I'll back up a second and say, CMS's guidance for when agents hit this error code is they gave agents kind of two primary options. Mm-hmm. Option one, you can call a three-way line with the Marketplace Help Center and you can resolve there. Option two is you can have the consumer complete the application themselves on an EDE pathway or on healthcare.gov. So we thought option two played really well with the HealthSherpa system, because the agent's kind of working the application through in HealthSherpa. You hit the error code. You then can send your consumer a link to finalize the application, and it makes sure to capture that member intent again, and it kind of acts as smart two-factor authentication too. So we released that fix, and then CMS asked us to remove it to bring in even more stringent controls on authentication there. So we're currently in this in-between time between having that pathway up and looking towards the next thing.
Yeah, you and I talked that night that they implemented it, and I think I called it a janky 2FA for the time being, but it was working, Yep. And then why was that not sufficient, or why were they not happy? Why didn't they think that solved the problem enough? Why did they go a little further?
So I'll say at a very kind of high meta level, I think that at this point, any report of abuse or workarounds is escalating quickly and being taken extremely seriously, right? And I also think that there's just not a great understanding of how many agents are following the guidance and doing the right thing. Again, I think there's maybe a perception issue here where people assume that most agents or a lot of agents are bad actors and are going to abuse these pathways. In fact, what we saw in the HealthSherpa end is that wasn't the case. Agents were doing what, they were evolving with the regulations and kind of, adapting this new solution. And so, yeah, I think that, sorry, I lost track of the question there.
No, so what I was saying is the ghetto 2FA or the janky 2FA was working, and then it was working for a week, and we in the industry adapted to it, and then they said no more. And I believe, we'd heard you say that some agents, or there were reports of people using incognito tabs and either performing that enrollment themselves.
Multiple emails, the same phone number to enroll people. I think we've all seen it on all the forums that, it was causing a big issue. They found a workaround of it, but now showing that CMS is really on top of it, they hurried and shut it down immediately, and people aren't going to be able to get away with stuff like they were in the past.
Yeah, so I would say...
Is that pretty accurate?
There's absolutely truth to that. Yeah, sorry, that's where I was going, was that any issue that's being reported is taken seriously and it's escalating quickly. And there was some reports, I think mainly through the call center channel, that this link was being abused, in different ways. And
so it's like I tell my kids, this is why we can't have nice things,
right?
A couple... Or
just takes one bad actor.
It takes one bad actor and you screw it up for everybody, right? And you have a handful of these bad actors that thought they were clever or that were still finding the way to keep their schemes going, and it caused CMS to react further, right?
Yeah, and we were hot on the tail of these things too, like not to nerd out too hard on the behind the scenes stuff, but we were working on like IP tracking, for example, so that you couldn't masquerade as a consumer with the, and open up the consumer portal yourself. So we were creating this monitoring. We have created the monitoring, and we're also creating like blocks in place so that you wouldn't be able to perform these behaviors. But
so you were working on it, because that was one of my questions for you guys is, well, why don't you just, surely it's got to be easily identifiable who's trying these workarounds. Why not just ban them? Why punish everybody? But you basically didn't even have enough time to implement those.
You guys were close. Weren't you guys like a week away from rolling this out?
Yeah. The link was out there. It was being utilized quite heavily. So the big change came out on July 19th, and we saw enrollments fall pretty quickly after the error code change. And then we saw them kind of climbing back up, right? And we were monitoring to see if there was cases of abuse, and we were going to put in these anti-masquerading things. And then we were asked to take it down. Again, I think that CMS is operating with just extreme levels of caution right now, which, makes sense in many ways. But there is hope for us to bring this link solution back. I think that it will probably include some sort of like an ID verification step versus the two-factor authentication, which will be more in line with the security protocols that are on healthcare.gov.
Okay, cool. So one of the things that I think that the ACA struggles with compared to, let's say, Medicare is everybody on Medicare has an MBI, right? And the system only allows there to be one plan. The system has one slot available, and whatever plan you're on, it doesn't allow there to be another one. What is the technical difficulty of monitoring the ACA where it makes it so much more difficult to keep track of agent of record or which plan should be in place? I'm assuming it's because there's no single end source of like an MBI on the Medicare side of things. Is that kind of why it gets so complicated?
Yeah, I'm not, as you know, I'm not super familiar with the Medicare side. So would that be like one, like kind of a record that's shared across like carrier books or?
Yeah.
CMS has they call it marks. So it's kind of a repository where all of the enrollments pass through. So the carriers have to validate it with CMS, and then it goes back to the carrier, and it's either approved or denied.
Yeah, so it seems like CMS has some work to do on the back end too, because right now it's what like socials function as, or like, whatever.
It's exactly what socials are using for, yeah.
But like the way that the Medicare system functions is you have your MBI, and let's say I enroll Jeff in the Humana plan for next month. He's on that Humana plan, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, unless another approved enrollment with a valid SEP goes through, and then it kicks that one out and puts that one in. So you deal with a little bit of the flip-flopping and the back and forth on the Medicare side of things, but ultimately, and this is what I was referring to, is there's a source of truth, right? There's a back-end government CMS sanctioned source of truth that arbitrates what plan or what agent is in that slot. And it seems like there's some difficulties on the back end to link that up.
Yeah, definitely. And that is one of the pieces of the MDN, the Member Defense Network, that we were working on, is to have a shared source of truth in the back end where you could identify duplicate applications, application changes across carrier books, so that you could give the carriers more reliable data of what was happening in the market.
Yeah, and for us, do you have something?
I was just going to say there's also the problem of sometimes agents don't put the socials on. Sometimes, so it's hard to validate when you've got those rogue agents out there not putting in complete applications
or
too.
there's people that don't have socials, they use other identification mechanisms as well. But one of the things that's really frustrating for me to watch the evolution and the pain that we're going through on the ACA side of things is we've already been there and done that. You know what I mean? We've already seen and experienced a lot of these things on the Medicare side of things, specifically with Medicare Advantage. And I just know what the end game and the end result is. And so it's like, man, it seems like we're trying to go through a lot of pain and solve a lot of these problems when we've already gone through this on another government, managed program, subsidized program. It's specifically like agent of record, right? AOR used to be a thing in Medicare, and it used to be a big thing. And I think there is a place for agent of record rather than having to submit or change someone's plan. I think it would actually cut down on the Medicare side of things on a lot of plan changes where agents, or I've even had clients tell me, like, I don't care if I have to change my plan. I just want you to be my agent. And I'm like, I don't know. I guess I could put you on this like kind plan and then I can be your agent, which seems completely silly that you would have to go all the way through that versus just a legitimate mechanism to change an agent of record. But what ultimately happened on the Medicare side of things was agent of record is basically non-existent. On the Medicare side of things, do you think we're heading that direction on the ACA side of things?
Well, from what I've seen is that I think agent of record is going to become, well, I think where we're seeing things trending is on the state end. There needing to be more kind of appointments at the individual agent level, right? Where the individual agent of record is probably going to rise in prominence if things are going to keep going the way that they're going, because CMS released some new guidelines recently that basically said that, like, hey, in regards to MPN override, in regards to doing things like referral programs, you need to follow the state DOIs. And so there are like 9 states out there that you can write under where the individual agent does not necessarily need to be appointed. Correct. But then there's many other states where it's a little grayer. Then you have a state like like in North Carolina or something like that, which is very strict on the individual agent appointment. So at least if that's where things are going, then it's probably going to become even more.
I'm in favor of that change, right?
Absolutely.
Like what he's referring to is the fact that people have been able to write under someone else's NPN, and that's what's allowed in my opinion, that's what's allowed the mechanism for a lot of these massive fraudulent entities to run like a gross bad quality churn and burn call center and write them under the same NPN, or have an entity that just hires people to data enrich and squat on all these policies. I think that's actually a good change. And you can't write a policy unless you're a licensed agent on the Medicare side of things and you own that policy and you're appointed with that carrier in that state. Yeah. I think that'd be a good change. And I think that's pretty much, we're all universally agreeing that that's kind of where the industry's headed, right?
Yeah. I would just say that, like, there definitely needs to be some reform on how easy or difficult appointments are, but yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a couple other things. So just kind of give us a little hint or talk as much as you can about where you see things going. I know HealthSherpa is waiting to kind of hear from CMS if we can get the link back, but kind of what are the next steps, or what should agents be looking for?
Yeah, so I would first say, like, keep your ear to the ground because stuff is changing very, very quickly. If you're a HealthSherpa user, definitely be, pay attention to your email, because we've been emailing out these changes as soon as they happen. And if we've been developing fixes and pushing them out into the market, we've been pushing that out. Obviously, talk to your agency. We're in constant contact with those folks as well. But yeah, so right now we're kind of in the stage where we're hoping to get the consumer link out again with like an ID proofing solution. We're hopeful that that's going to come very soon. That's definitely what we're pushing for, so that we can have that in place before open enrollment. And then I would just say that, like, yeah, do things the right way, because, like, I would say that, like, we're at the point now where CMS is not hesitating to push out change very, very quickly. And some of that change will be more of the sledgehammer variety than the scalpel variety. So we just want to make sure that things are very, buttoned up and that are happening by the book, so that we can keep growing, so that we can keep growing enrollment and have a really, really good OEP. without further restriction.
Yeah. So just to kind of close the loop on this before we move on to some other things, is right now the finishing the enrollment, the error code is closed down the pathway right now, and the only way to update an app or do an agent of record change is by calling into CMS.
Correct.
And by having a 3-way call. And so it kind of went, hey, here's the only way to do it. You can do it this 3-way call or this, application finish. And then that got changed. Now it's only the CMS. And I will say call times were really bad for a little while. And now we're able to get in 5 to 20 minutes. Is that?
It's pretty accurate last week, yes.
That's not great, but I'll be honest, it's better than what I was expecting from CMS. I was like, how the hell are you going to ramp up enough people to take these calls? Because you're going to get flooded with calls. But I will say that's not going to happen during open enrollment. You are not going to be able to keep up with that volume.
There's going to be over an hour.
Armies of people that are going to be answering these calls. And so I think we absolutely have to have some sort of digital application mechanism or some EDE pathway there to finish those applications. So, well, let's talk also about maybe state-based exchanges versus FFM and kind of where things are going there. We talked a little bit at lunch about Georgia, et cetera. Mm-hmm. What can you fill us in on the HealthSherpa side of things with where things are heading for state-based exchanges?
Yeah, so I'll say I think it's interesting to kind of talk about state-based exchanges at a high level and look at how state-based exchanges have been growing and changing over the years versus the FFM markets, which obviously with the inception of EDE have really embraced the agent broker role. So right now in the FFM, 80% of enrollments are driven by agents and brokers. And we saw 67% year over year growth in the ACA with FFM markets, right? So the federal marketplace where you can access the EDE pathway. State-based exchanges are more restrictive to brokers. They're harder to operate in. And they've seen about 14% growth year over year, right? And so
14 versus 80?
Versus I think like 67.
Okay. 14.
Yeah. 80% of FFM enrollments are driven by agents and brokers, just kind of highlighting that like agents are the reason that the ACA is what it is.
It's the only reason it's working.
It's the only reason it's working, and they've driven that growth. And the reason that the ACA overall, you've got that awesome 21 million number, is because the FFM markets via agent and brokers have been driving that growth, right? And so Georgia is a really interesting case because Georgia is moving to a state-based exchange, but they're allowing for an EDE style pathway. So you'll be able to write Georgia plans the same that you do in the FFM states on HealthSherpa, and it'll work very similar, right? And so if that goes well, it's going to create an interesting case study to say, if you embrace the agent and broker role in enrollments, you can still operate a high growth state-based exchange that looks a lot like the FFM's levels of success versus the more modest growth in the other state-based exchanges. So we're stoked because we're gonna launch the Georgia platform. We're gonna tell all of our agents and brokers partners about it. You do need to get recertified in Georgia, except for some folks, I believe. If you were certified in Georgia last year, there was a cutoff date where you might be kind of grandfathered into to that. So make sure to get trained for Georgia. You can figure out how to do that through HealthSherpa.
We sent a link out to our agents last week about it.
Awesome. Yeah. And so you can use HealthSherpa to write your FFM markets. You can use HealthSherpa to write Georgia. And we're hoping to have a huge year in Georgia to show other state-based exchanges that, look, if you embrace the agent broker role, you're going to have a more successful market here. So we're excited.
Do you all think that every state wants to grow ACA enrollments? Like some of these, I'll call them backwards state-based exchanges that are a little bit more difficult to work with or have some more crazy rules or requirements. Do you think that across the board, every state wants to grow ACA enrollments, or some of them are like, we're kind of fine with it is?
I think some of them are just fine where it is. I mean, you look at how difficult it is to do business in some of these state-based exchanges. It's like, I don't know how you're looking for growth with how hard you're making this.
What do you think?
I don't know. I think almost everybody would probably say that they want to see the enrollments grow. But but again, sorry to be a broken record.
Yeah.
I think that people don't value the agent role.
Yeah.
I think that there's one thing that we've seen at HealthSherpa is that the agents and brokers are the key to the ACA, right? And if you want to see growth and if you want to have that flourish, you need to embrace that role, because some state-based exchanges have like these, delegation platforms and stuff that are just really hard to link up an agent with a consumer. And there's been other models that we've tried that have been more, like the Navigators model and stuff, like it's helpful service, but it's just a drop in the bucket compared to what agents and brokers would be able to drive within private industry. So they probably say yes.
That's a whole other conversation that I could go on a tangent about, like navigators and ship counselors versus actually agents and brokers. And of course, what side I'm gonna come down on, but
right.
I'll put the knowledge and expertise of 10 average brokers against 10 average navigators and ship counselors head to head anytime, and I feel pretty confident about how that's going to turn out. But I'm just curious, because there are some of these state-based exchanges that we look at growing in nationally, especially two that are connected to our home state here, that are notoriously difficult to work with and do business in. And I look at it and go, I know you want to grow your ACA enrollments, and of course you want to do it. I think they also get a little bit scared of the fraud that's happened on the FFM side of things, and that's kind of the in closed door meetings of what they use as a justification for not going that way, is that, if we open the door up or make it easier, then all the fraud comes in. We let all the foxes into the hen house, so to say.
There's also there's several that want to protect their resident brokers. Like they don't want to have non-resident brokers, which is like, well, that's great, but there's plenty of knowledgeable brokers outside of your state too. So
yeah, that's another conversation, that we could have too about. But yeah, there's just some of these states where we'd really love to grow in and do some state-based business in, but they just make it a little bit difficult. So I hope that that's my long rambling way of saying I hope that the Georgia goes well.
We hope it's ultra successful.
Yeah, and that a lot of these other, even if you want to have a state-based exchange, that you can have those same useful tools that HealthSherpa provides for the agents to help grow that business, because there are lots of people. I think the ACA is not going anywhere. Doesn't matter what administration is up next. It's here to stay. How we optimize it and how we best serve people is up to us as brokers and partners here in the industry, and we're going to be a big part of the future, I feel like.
Yep.
So what else was on the agenda to cover? I know we wanted to kind of get into...
Let's talk a little bit about ICRA.
Yep, that's where I was going next.
Tell me a little bit about what HealthSherpa is doing.
So ICRA, just because we did a podcast on this before, so go back and listen to our ICRA podcast if you haven't, but it's ICHRA, right? Which stands for what, Heather? Put you on the spot here. Individual
Coverage Health Reimbursement Account.
Boom. That's why you're on the podcast here, because I don't know that I would have got that.
I have to write it down because I always forget.
So who wants to kind of talk about what ICRA is, and then you can talk about HealthSherpa and how what the future is there.
ICRA is an alternative to a group plan. So the employer, rather than paying the premiums that they would pay for an employer plan, gives each of the individuals a certain amount of money in an account and say, here, go to the marketplace and buy your own coverage.
I am a big fan, and I think it's got a bright future, and I think it's going to have a lot of runway ahead. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, I agree. I'm really excited about the ICRA market. I think there's a lot of excitement about the ICRA market, and I think that a lot of agencies, a lot of carriers, we've seen this be a major topic in amongst some of the biggest carriers, that they're going to be investing more resources and kind of unlocking the ICRA market. It's a coiled spring full of potential, right? And so I think everybody's pretty excited about it. Few observations on the ICRA space that we've seen. Again, I'm going to go back to the same thing. The agent and broker role is what we've seen be the key to unlock success with ICRA too. Because if you think about it, ICRA is a really awesome idea of being able to have employer subsidized access to the ACA. But it's complicated. Like even just saying that is like kind of a lot. So you think about like, well, how do I, deal with those reimbursements, and how do I help people select plans, and what's available for me, and what's going to compare to the plan that I did have when I was on a group plan. And so you really need a guide through that process.
You mentioned something about a census about with agent-driven enrollments versus like the census on group plans. They filled it out more thoroughly. What was that statistic? Do you remember?
Yeah. So if you take like an employee census, like let's say you run a business and you have 100 employees. I think a lot of the excitement around ICRA has been kind of artificially stuffed in the D2C, or I guess D2E, direct to employee bucket. And so if you have 100 employees and you offer them a direct portal to go enroll in their ICRA plan, you might see, 10% uptake on that. It's confusing. It's hard to figure out exactly what is being offered and how to enroll. If there's an agent in the middle of that employee and the enrollment platform, you can see as much as like 70-75% penetration of that census. So, and that's kind of on par with the group plans in general, from my understanding, is that like 75 out of 100 employees, the other 25 might be on a spouse plan or something else. So, so it's pretty good. And so I think what the market hasn't figured out yet is how to really involve the agent broker in the process. Because you kind of need like a two-sided sales process, right? You need the ability to kind of have that group sales muscle of getting the employer on board with, we want to do ICRA. We think this is a great alternative to group. But then you also have to have agents, individual agents working with the individual employees, right?
Like an implementation side of things. Yeah,
exactly. But one exciting thing about ICRA is that it's just got very high retention, rates, because it's a captive audience. They're, going to stay with that employer, and ICRA plans are portable too. So, you can get the same plan when you leave the employer. And so what HealthSherpa is doing right now is that
I think that's huge. I'm sorry, I just want to go back, because everybody goes on to Cobra and there's that transition there. Right. And I think that's incredibly huge and incredibly valuable for people that, maybe they know they're in positions where it's not their long-term career and things like that.
Yeah, it's very flexible for folks, and it also it's also very flexible depending on if you have employees in different states at different income levels, all that kind of stuff. So it's just configuring it and figuring out and educating the employer is a kind of the hill to climb there. So what HealthSherpa is doing right now is that we have obviously our bread and butter is on exchange enrollments because that's what most people are doing on HealthSherpa. And on exchange makes sense in some ICRA situations. So we process a good amount of ICRA enrollments that are on exchange enrollments where the agent is just using HealthSherpa as their enrollment platform of choice when they're enrolling folks in an ICRA. We also have several off-exchange integrations too, because there's a lot of cases where the off-exchange enrollment makes more sense for the ICRA in the ICRA case than the on-exchange plan does. So we have some of those integrations, and we're looking to build out more of those integrations too. And so right now, either employers can work with HealthSherpa, where they can have a kind of white labeled site where if you're like a restaurant, you could have that restaurant logo on your HealthSherpa site, and you could send that to your employees. But like I said, I think that is going to get you probably lower penetration. And then what we also do is obviously work with our agent and broker partners that if somebody's getting into ICRA, we're going to work with them on reporting and stuff like that. Perfect.
Yeah. What do you guys think about how agents can utilize HealthSherpa and ICRA in the future? I think it's going to be a massively growing market over the next 12 to 24 months.
I think, talking with reps at Ambetter, they're investing into it. They're trying to educate their brokers. I think you're going to see more and more things come out from carriers over the next couple of months. But going back to what you said, if you leave your employer, you're able to keep your plan. It also opens up the door for employees out of state, depending on what type of group plan you're on. Some local plans here in Utah, you can't have more than 50% of your employees out of their own network. So this kind of allows you to expand, employment opportunities because more and more companies are going virtual. I think this is going to be great for the consumer.
And it's also for employers, it's a way for them to contain costs because they say, we're going to give you this amount of money. You can pick your whatever plan you want, but we know what it's going to cost us.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So a couple of last things before we wrap. I wanted to talk about some ancillary products and that are going on the platform right now. It looks like, can you talk about who's going to be on HealthSherpa very shortly to enroll?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have
like
AllState did announce. Yes, they did. Yeah, they did announce. Yes.
I knew they were on the podcast recently. That's awesome. So yeah, we're doing a partnership with AllState. We're super, super excited about. So it's an integration with HealthSherpa where we will send plan information from HealthSherpa into AllState so that you can do your shopping in the AllState platform, then complete the enrollment on HealthSherpa. And then within the AllState platform, you can kind of have a, one place to add in your ancillary and all that kind of stuff. So we're excited about the partnership. The AllState team has been awesome to work with. And I don't think I have a date for you yet, but I know it's coming very soon.
Yeah, and we did a past podcast talking about it. If anyone wants to go back and look at it, the AllState reps kind of went in a little bit of detail. We're thrilled to have them on your guys' platform because all our agents use HealthSherpa and their information's right there, and it's supposed to be able to go right into their plan. So we're ecstatic.
Awesome.
How many, what's the appetite or on the roadmap for HealthSherpa to expand kind of some of those third-party and ancillary carriers in platform there? Is that a major part of HealthSherpa's roadmap going forward?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you think about like two paths for this, one is to add every single person, like every single ancillary plan that people demand that we put in HealthSherpa. That would be path one. That sounds like a very steep hill to climb. Or we can integrate with the platforms like AllState that they do that well, right? And that they can educate within that ecosystem and how to use that and how to use that platform, and we'll be happy to be the enrollment pipes for those integrations. I mean, really, ACA is our bread and butter. The agent and broker role in servicing the agent and broker customer is really our key priority. So we would prefer to kind of partner with the ancillary on the ancillary side.
Perfect. I know HealthSherpa has plenty of monsters to fight right now, plenty of solutions. What else is on the roadmap for HealthSherpa, or what are you guys excited about, 12 to 24 months from now?
Yeah, I mean, so 12 to 24 months feels like a lifetime.
How about, But I would 12 to 24 hours.
Especially like how the last 3 weeks have been.
Yeah. Let me check my email and see what's on the roadmap for today. So I think we've got a couple awesome things coming up. So we're excited about Georgia. Please get certified and ready to sell in Georgia, and we'd love it if you use HealthSherpa. We're excited about our Medicare platform launch. So we've got our Medicare platform coming out. It's in beta right now. I think we have a couple people going to start testing it really soon.
Yeah, we're testing it.
You kick the tires?
I don't know. Can we say that? Yeah.
I think we're allowed to say we're testing it for you guys.
So we do have a good relationship with some of the other competitors in that space, but competition's a good healthy thing. We're beta testing it with you guys right now.
Awesome. Well, you guys are always like the first place I go for feedback, so we're excited that you're going to try it out. It's going to be free for agents and agencies to use, and it's part of the HealthSherpa ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like if you're used to writing ACA and HealthSherpa, are used to the interface, it's obviously going to be Medicare specific, but it's going to be a very familiar interface. And especially if you're writing both and you're kind of a dual agent writing Medicare and ACA, it's kind of a one-stop to be able to see like all of your enrollments across both platforms. So it's going to be a little feature light at launch because we're just getting it off the ground, but we're super excited to keep building on it.
Is it common knowledge, or is it a secret of who your partner is on the back end of the enrollments on that?
No, we're partnered with Connecture on the back end.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that because that platform has a lot of trust and credibility with the broker community on the Medicare side of things. And so I think when you go HealthSherpa and Connecture, there's a lot of credibility there. And so I just didn't know if we could say that or not. But I just wanted to get.
And again, it's going to be free.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Talk a little bit more about how you guys, I mean, how do you monetize that for you as a company when platforms like HealthSherpa or Sunfire are charging, a platform fee, a SaaS fee, and then like a per enrollment? How are you guys able to do that at no cost? And then is that the plan to keep that way in the future?
Yeah. So I think one of the keys to HealthSherpa's success has been keeping it free for brokers and agents and making sure that it remains free for agents and brokers. And so our monetization model is that we bring a ton of value to our carrier partners, right? We build software, tools, and solutions for them. I mean, we power something like 45 carrier white label sites with the HealthSherpa technology. And obviously, it's the way that they get a lot of the enrollments from the agents that they work with. So they value us highly and they pay us for that. And so that's how we monetize the platform is with our carrier partners.
I like that because carrier partners and the government have deeper pockets than us and the brokers, for sure. So I like that strategy.
Yeah, I mean, agencies are a lot of, the ACA is like still a pretty nascent business, right? So a lot of agencies are new or have recently pivoted into the space. They're startups, right? They're like exciting, like very iterative businesses. And so, yeah, we want to make sure that we don't place any more hurdles in their path to being successful.
Yeah, it's these days it's pretty easy to sass yourself up into quite a monthly bill with all these different tech stacks and platforms and services that you have to be competitive these days. So I definitely appreciate it. We're excited to test out that enrollment platform, and I know you guys are going to do great things with it because of who you guys are as a company, what you've been able to build on the ACA side of things, your pedigree and Connecture on the back end as well. So really excited for that. And again, I think competition just makes, high tide raises all boats, so to say. And I think that's just good for the ecosystem. What
Absolutely.
else? Any final thoughts we want to get out?
I think one thing we appreciate is the brokers, HealthSherpa, going to the government and lobbying to make enrollments easier access for us. Us little agents don't have the power to go and speak to them, but organizations like you lobbying on our behalf, I think I can say on behalf of all the brokers, we really appreciate what you guys are doing for us in the industry, especially with all the changes that have happened over the last 3 weeks.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that, our job there and kind of how I fit into the puzzle, we have an awesome government relations team, so they're going to really appreciate that feedback. But we need to make the role of the agent broker more well understood. And I mean, agents brokers are awesome at a lot of things. I don't know if they're good at PR, present company excluded. We're on a podcast right now, but I think for the most part, there's a lot of work to do to kind of increase the visibility of what good agencies and brokers are doing, especially with the government audience.
Yeah, we were talking at lunch that, there's not a lot of entities that have the ear of CMS in a good way. And some of the ones that do aren't really volume entities, or they're not some of the bigger players in the industry. But I really do appreciate what Jeff said. And, you guys lobbying with CMS, I asked how often your team's interfacing with CMS, and you said hourly, basically. You have people that are in direct communication there. And I think that's good, right? Like we've been talking about on former podcasts. I think the key to smooth out some of these things in the industry on the ACA and on the Medicare side of things is stop looking at it as these like opposing forces, right? Like CMS and regulatory bodies and the private markets and the brokers. And we've all got to like do a better job of coming together and understanding the challenges that the beneficiaries are facing and smooth that out, because I think everybody's ultimately has the same goal. And that's one thing that I think people forget. And even regulators is we brokers, we want to make a buck and we want to be able to have a good living, but ultimately we really want to help the beneficiaries and we want to feel that value and that worth in what we do. And you guys are a critical piece in that ecosystem there. So really appreciate you guys and appreciate the partnership.
Yeah, likewise. You guys are our first stop for feedback, and we really appreciate Agent Boost partnership. So thanks.
Yeah, it's been a great relationship, and we look forward to growing it even further. So seriously, this guy came all the way out across the country, 4 a.m. flight, and it's bad weather today too, so we don't get to do anything really fun. So appreciate you, Adam. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Like, subscribe, do all the things, comment below, tell us feedback. Anything helps the podcast grow. If you get any value out of this, if you're not going to work with Agent Boost at some point down the road, at least give us a like or something like that. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Agent Boost.